Hi, everyone. Welcome to Alumni Days. My name is Joseph Hedden. I am a 1997 graduate of Pittsburgh Theological Seminary, as well as the current president of the seminary's Alumni Council. It's good to be with you today. And I have been asked to talk with you about self-care and spirituality in anxious times. And I want to start by expressing my presumption, my bias here, that much of what we do in the church right now, particularly in the Western church and the church that I have the most experience in, Western culture in general, is shoulders up kind of material. And what I mean by that is we're very thinking and action oriented. We're very brain oriented. Seminary is about learning the proper facts about the Bible, about ministry, about preaching, about teaching. Our confirmation classes, we teach students what to think. Many of our confirmation resources, at least in the recent past, have been fill in the blank sorts of questions. How long did Jesus spend in the desert? What were the temptations that Satan offered Jesus, and so on and so forth. Many times confirmation material is to memorize Bible verses in the Western church, and we're impressed with people who have a great knowledge of the Bible. And many of our rites in the church are about what you know. The reason that is often given for holding off communion until confirmation age is so that the children will understand what they're doing. How often have we heard that, or have we expressed that? And I would propose to you that we've approached self-care and spirituality in much the same way, in a disembodied way. There's nothing wrong with thinking. It's just incomplete. The way that we do talk therapy and self-care, the way that we think that we will think our way out of anxiety or depression or worries, that if we just get our theology to line up, our thinking to line up with who we are as a person, then we will somehow defeat the anxieties and the stressors of this time in which we live. And again, thinking is good. It's part of the matrix of who we are, but it is incomplete. There is more to it than that. And I'm going off the idea from the Enneagram, if you're familiar with that, the Enneagram self-study, that we really have three centers, and the number isn't really important, but the Enneagram talks about a thought center, about a heart center, and about a gut center. And I would propose to you that for the most part, in our way of dealing with self-care, our way of dealing with the world, we're pretty much stuck in the thought center. And we need to remember that we have a heart center, compassion, that we have a gut center, intuition, feelings, emotions, and that those centers need to be part of any self-care routine, any self-care understanding. Paul talks in Romans chapter 8, verses 22 and 23. He writes, we know that the whole creation has been groaning in labor pains until now. And not only creation, but we ourselves, who have the first fruits of the Spirit, groan inwardly while we wait for adoption, the redemption of our bodies. Paul doesn't say the redemption of our minds. Paul doesn't say the redemption of our thinking or getting right thoughts. He talks about the redemption of our bodies. The Bible itself, I would propose to you, is more holistic in terms of its understanding of the human person than we have been. Thinking on another passage from Scripture, from Luke's Gospel, chapter 7. One of the Pharisees asked Jesus to eat with him, and he went to the Pharisee's house and took his place at the table. And a woman in the city who was a sinner having learned that he was eating at the Pharisee's house, brought in an alabaster jar of ointment. She stood behind him at his feet, weeping, and began to bathe his feet with her tears and to dry them with her hair. Then she continued kissing his feet and anointing them with the ointment. Again, this woman in the story doesn't say anything, which is unusual in Jesus' interactions with people. He's very often asking people, what do you want me to do for you? What kind of healing do you want? What kind of experience do you want to have? And in this moment, it's done without any dialogue. There's a little dialogue afterwards, but that's between Jesus and the Pharisees. This here is an embodied, almost sensual way of her expressing her devotion to Jesus. Sometimes it makes us uncomfortable. We look at it and we think, oh, that seems a little too close. That seems a little too sensual for our preconceived notions of who or what Jesus is. And then, of course, I'm recording this in the middle of Lent. The washing of the feet, a very famous passage. Again, bodily, Jesus does something. He takes off his outer robe, wraps himself in a towel, washes the feet of the disciples, a very embodied way of serving other people. And I just highlight those three. There are hundreds of others that we could look at that say, don't give short shrift to bodily emotions, bodily feelings, bodily understandings, that self-care has to be embodied. And that is the point of what I hope to bring to you today. That self-care needs to be embodied. There's a quote that's attributed to Viktor Frankl, the author of the book Man's Search for Meaning. And I'm not sure that he actually said it. I haven't ever found confirmation that he said it, but it certainly fits with his general outlook on life. The quote is, "Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom." I'm going to read that again. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. And in our response lies our growth and our freedom. And I want to talk us through just a moment of what that means to me in terms of embodied self-care. There is a difference between a situation that faces us and how we respond to it. And we normally don't think of it in those terms. We normally take the situation and we immediately go to the response. We don't see that freedom spot. Someone comes at us in a moment of high stress and anxiety. Someone yells at us and we immediately think, what is it that I can say to smooth this over? Or we go to, yes, I did mess up. I always mess this kind of thing up. Why do I continue to do this? Why did I take this action without consulting with this person first? They do have a point. I am acting impulsively. But what actually happens when there is a stimulus and response, what actually happens when someone comes to you and they are dissatisfied with something, I would suggest that maybe it doesn't go to the brain quite as quickly as we think or as immediately as we think. There's been a lot of research done on the vagus nerve, used to be called the wandering nerve, the longest cranial nerve in the body, and how it reacts to stimulus. It goes all the way down the spinal cord. It connects to your lungs, it connects to your stomach, to your intestines, and it's a two-way street. Yet 80% of the vagus nerve fibers send messages from your body to your brain. 80% of the nerve fibers send the messages from your body to the brain, from your stomach, your intestines, your lungs, your heart, your throat, when you are experiencing the world. 20% of the fibers go in the opposite direction, from the brain sending messages to those other organs. So what does that tell us about embodiment? or about spirituality and self-care. It tells us that when you encounter a stimulus, I think, and this all happens so quickly, I think what happens is you emote it. Hormones start rushing through you. Your lymph nodes start running. That's why you get butterflies in your stomach, your throat. You can feel your throat closing. Well before you think about what is it that I can do to help this person? What is it that I can do to protect myself? It's an instinctual thing. It's something that is built into our biology. And you've all heard of fight, flight, or freeze. And those are the three reactions. And there's probably more than three of them, but the three reactions when we feel we are in an unsafe place. We produce hormones that get us ready to fight, or that get us ready to take cover, flight, or we shut down. And those hormones are rushing through your body, adrenaline and other things, and that affects how we think about the situation in front of us. And we are living in a time that feels very stressful. That is very stressful. Doesn't just feel it. The stressors are particularly painful and everywhere present. There is an understanding of stress that is everywhere present. We've all been through, in the past 2 years, the COVID-19 pandemic, where every aspect of your life as a pastor, as a social worker, as a chaplain, as a parent, as a citizen was impacted by COVID-19. Whether it was deciding how best you wanted to protect your family from the virus, or what your responsibility was to your neighbor, or how to lead worship in a safe way, to processing information about the safety and frequency of the vaccines, to how to take care of aging parents or grandparents. Each aspect of life, even going out to the grocery store, people having the masks over their face, reminds us that we live in a time of great stress, that we live in a time of difficulty. And you process that bodily, even if you think, oh, I'm okay with it. Even if you think, no, I'm good. I've dealt with this. I've sort of rationally thought through it. Well, no, when you go out into the public, you are also experiencing things through that vagus nerve, and that is sending communication to your to the rest of to your brain. And we've seen it also in terms of we have a mental health crisis right now. We've had it for a while, but it is made worse by the COVID-19 pandemic. We have seen regression in school students losing 2 years of their normal education, and we've seen regression not only in terms of what they know, in terms of their skills that are measurable on standardized testing and so forth, but also we're seeing it psychologically and in spirituality. Children who have regressed because of social isolation, lack of time with their friends. What we need to say to ourselves, though, is that the situation is something that is just a given. Be it anxiety or stress, it's normal. Feeling anxious is not something bad. It is a response to stimulus. It is a flag for something. It is your body trying to get your attention. And as I said, we have built-in biological reactions to anxiety and stressors: fight, flight, or freeze. Yet in many situations, in terms of leadership and in terms of self-care, we can't go on like that for a long time. You can't be in a continual state of fight, flight, or freeze and feel comfortable and feel like you are taking good care of yourself, self-care. It's not a good coping mechanism as a church leader. It's not a good coping mechanism for yourself. It leads to all sorts of other health problems in the body. So what do? We learn to deal with our stimulus and our response to stimuli by becoming aware of it. in an embodied way and by giving it to God also in an embodied way. And what I would like you to do, first of all, to demonstrate to you why embodiment is so important and why it is more than just thought. I want you to take a moment, if it's at all possible, if you're watching this at home or in your office, to take a moment and close your eyes and to picture in the past, I don't know, month, the most stressful thing that has happened to you recently, the time you felt least safe. And try and picture it in your mind's eye, how you bodily were in that moment. Were you sitting? Were you standing? Were you walking somewhere? Were you driving in the car? And now picture, if you could focus in on one part of your body, where were you most feeling that stress? Where did you most feel that tension? Some people get a headache. They feel stress very much in the head. Some people it's in the jaw, clenching of the jaw. Some people when they sleep, they grind their teeth and clench their jaw at night. For other people, it is butterflies in the stomach. So where did you feel that tension? Where did you feel most unsafe? And then ask yourself, did you think about it? Did you move up the line of the vagus nerve from feeling and experiencing an emotion to where did this go? What were your thoughts in the moment or in the hours ahead? Were they realistic? Were your thoughts the self-critical thoughts that you have maybe from childhood? A lot of us have that. A demanding parent, sometimes we internalize that voice and think you should have done better. Did you go to, many people go to the most catastrophic thing they can think of. If this happens, then this will happen, then this will happen, then this will happen, and then everything will be a mess. That very often is how we think of things, and that builds on our stress. But notice and if you haven't opened your eyes, I encourage you to do so now. Notice the lag space, if you will, between the stimulus and your thinking response. You had a choice in there to acknowledge what you were feeling and where you were feeling it in your body, naming it. Sometimes we don't think we have a choice because we think we go immediately to, I'm feeling this this lack of safety in my neck, in my shoulders, and that is an indication to me that I messed up. But that's not necessarily accurate. And there's a big difference between the very similar statements, I am feeling stressed, and I am stressed. Very big difference. Similar statements, I am feeling stressed versus I am stressed. Huge difference in those two statements. Now, the reason I encouraged you to do this exercise now when you are safe in your office, I'm in mine at the church, is it is easier to recognize it later in the moment. It's very hard to do this on the fly. As you can imagine, with all your hormones racing, the next time something happens, if you don't practice it, you're not going to have the presence of mind, if you will, to interrupt this thought process, this vagus nerve process. And it's helpful to do practice, you'll get better at it, like anything else. And this process happens whether we know it or not, whether we recognize it or not, whether we name it or not. But it happens. And we live in such a time that self-care can seem like swimming upstream against the current. The current war in Ukraine causes stress, doom scrolling on the internet about the potential for a widening war in Europe. We have mask mandates and kids bullied in school. This has affected church budgets and church staffing, the Great Resignation, which has affected the church just as much as every other industry. The January 6th insurrection, Capitol, climate issues. A lot of this gets worked out in people blaming other people. It's your fault, pastor, that people aren't coming back to church. You did something wrong here. If you had acted quicker, acted slower in terms of COVID-19 response, then people would have understood it better. This is clearly where you made a mistake. If you acted more like the church down the street, the parking lot would be full. From a cultural perspective, this stuff that infiltrates into the church and church leadership, from a cultural perspective, it is no wonder that we are engaged very much in stressors. From the start of the 21st century, 2000, right? Young people have gone through, but young people, I think, feel this particularly acutely because it's all they've known. It's their only reality. We've gone through 9/11, the worst attack on American soil, perhaps ever, against us. And then years, 18 or so years of involvement in wars overseas caused by that 9/11 event. Then we had economic crises, the 2008 Lehman Brothers and others crisis, Wall Street crisis, having to get bailed out by tax dollars. The housing bubble crisis about the same time, the greatest American downturn in economics since the Great Depression. We've endured a 2-year-long pandemic. I've already mentioned the Great Resignation. Then you put on top the opioid crisis, and you can see that there's a great deal of trauma. There's an epidemic of mental health issues right now. And I don't want to get too far off the self-care idea, but it's almost a chicken or the egg kind of thing in terms of the addiction crisis. You can understand, is this a symptom or is it a cause? You can understand that people are self-medicating themselves in the addiction crisis and in crises of alcoholism. It does something for them, takes them out of their pain. That's not to justify the behavior, but it's just to acknowledge it. And I think we are so unprepared to acknowledge pain in others or pain in ourselves. And we either deny it in our brain. Well, I'll think about that another time. I can't think about that right now. I have kids to take to school. I have assignments due. I have a sermon to prepare. I can't think about that right now. Or we just grit our teeth and get through it. We should get over it by now. This is not a normal way to grieve or to work through the world. I think I should get over it. I think. But if it's embodied, your body knows. There's a quote from Bessel van der Kolk in his book, The Body Keeps the Score. And the quote is, the body keeps the score and the body never lies. The body remembers. And that stress that you don't deal with here, it comes out in other ways. Your body carries it. And that's the problem with how we're talking about self-care right now. We believe we can think our way out of it from shoulders up. We can think our way out of self-care, or we can think our way out of the stress and anxiety, and thinking, talking to somebody, having a therapist, having a spiritual director, that's powerful. A pastoral counselor. Don't hear me saying that those things are bad. I'm just saying they're incomplete. There needs to be more than that. And we forget the biblical image that we are embodied creatures. We are the foundational understanding of Jesus' incarnation is an embodied understanding that God did not think God's way into salvation, but God embodied God's way into salvation in a manger in Bethlehem and on a cross outside of Jerusalem. And for ourselves, our bodies carry all that we don't process and that we do process. Our bodies carry our emotions, our anxieties, our traumas, our happiness. Our bodies carry all that kind of stuff for us. And if we don't acknowledge it, then we have cut off a significant part of who we are. That's why I am praying and hoping that when you think of self-care, you will think about, see, I can't even use the words properly. When you consider self-care, you will engage in self-care that is embodied, not just think about it. Whether it's yoga or an exercise routine or Tai Chi or biking or hiking, so much of what we do is embodied, is disembodied rather. And it's not lost to me the irony that I'm coming to you in a very disembodied way over a Zoom recording. But this is very much what our modern society does right now. The experience of Facebook is a disembodied experience. The experience of Instagram is a disembodied experience. YouTube, for a large part, is disembodied. Video games and smartphone apps. So much is disconnected from who we are wholly. So what I would like to do to finish out this session and finish out our talking is perhaps the most important bit of the whole thing. And if you get nothing else out of this time together, I encourage you to do this next practice with me. And this is a practice that can be found in a Pittsburgh Seminary graduate's book called Trauma Informed Yoga. It's an excellent book by Joanne Spence. She's a Pittsburgh located, Pittsburgh Central yoga practitioner and spiritual director, as well as a graduate of the seminary, and is currently still enrolled in some classes at the seminary. And her book is fantastic. I would highly recommend that you get it if you are interested in more embodied practices, more embodied ways of dealing with stimulus and response. And if you get nothing else out of this talk today, I encourage you, in the spirit in which I'm offering it to you, do this practice. Find a minute. If you have to pause the video and get some silent space, a space where you can do this practice, because this is really important. This is the important bit that I think needs to happen more often in our self-care embodied practices. This is a practice that she's labeled tense and relax, something I used years ago before I was even exposed to this kind of practice, before I even heard of trauma-informed yoga. I used it on long airplane flights when you cannot get up and walk around, right? You're 7 hours into a flight and you've got several hours left. This was a practice that I used, modified, of course. Joanne puts it out in a much more helpful way, but I used it, and it provided some comfort for me in a long haul flights, more than one. But this is a practice that encourages us to remind us of our body's reaction to things. And I just simply want you to take a moment and to notice your body, where you are located. Are you sitting in a chair? Are you in a place that feels tense to you or comfortable? Is the location important to you? That is the stimulus. So if you do have tension in your body someplace, or maybe you have a particularly joyful spot in your body right now, name it if you can. Name what is going on within you. Take a moment to just label it, experience it. Notice your breathing. Is your breathing fast or slow? The practice is called tense and relax. It is about going through sort of a bodily checklist. And don't worry if you can't get this right. This is a practice. That's why we do it in a safe space. The more you practice it, the easier this will find. There's not a right way or a wrong way to do this. And the point is to bring awareness to parts of your body that maybe are carrying something for you that you have not noticed before. We're going to tense a group of muscles and then relax them and notice the difference. We'll tense and relax. We'll tense and relax. So start with some people have tension in their fists. So start there. Just make a fist. Feel that tension in your hands. And then relax, open up. And again, tense and relax. Now start in your head. Bring your awareness to how you hold your head. Can you tense your forehead? Can you tense your eyebrows? Furrow your brow and relax. Try it again. Tense your head. This is where a lot of people get migraines, headaches, and relax. The eyes and the mouth around this part of your face. Tense and relax. Tense and relax. Your jaw, we talked about that earlier. A lot of people carry tension in their jaw. Feel yourself. Tense it up. And relax. And again, tense your jaw. Clench it. And relax. Your shoulders. Tense them up. Bring them up. And then in a more natural or relaxed state. Feel them tense. And bring them down. Arms. You have them at your sides, maybe have them stretched out. Feel that tension in your arms. Ready for something, for some stimulus. And then relax. Tense them and relax. Your chest and your belly, I like to hold a short breath there, because that's how I hold tension. I stop breathing for a moment, not too long. Just notice how you hold the tension in your trunk. Your rear, sitting in a chair, tense and relax. Tense and relax. Your thighs, tense, relax. Pressing in on the, getting some help from the floor to tense your thighs, relax. Your feet and your toes. Tensing and relaxing your feet and your toes. Now return to your face yet again. How do you carry it? Your mouth, your tongue, your lips. Tense and relax. And now take a moment to scan your whole self, your thought center, your heart center, and your gut center. What do you notice about what is now going on with you? You may want to take a few cleansing breaths, a shorter inhale, a longer exhale. Shorter inhale, 2, 3, a longer exhale. This is a first step in becoming aware of your embodied self and how you carry tension. And what do you notice about your body now? You've engaged your muscle groups, you've engaged your vagus nerve, sending messages both directions along that cycle from the brain, instructing those parts of your body to tense and then relax. And when you tense those parts of yourself, they sent messages back up to the brain, releasing messages about how your body is communicating with you. I hope you found this helpful. I really would encourage you to think about your embodiment when you are in prayer. For some people, it's Tai Chi while they're praying or shortly afterwards. I would also encourage you to get a journal and to write down what you notice, because then you can take it to God and ask God to notice with you. After all, God made you, and God made every part of us. We are fearfully and wonderfully made. And my prayer and hope for you is in these really challenging times that you may find in yourself, through emotional regulation, through your own embodied practices, a chance to connect to your true self, to your center. And at that center, find the Spirit of God. Blessings to you all. Thanks for spending the time with me today.